Right, we're now live, so I will make you host, Ian.
What about Colin Stewart, Lisa?
He's not in the waiting room yet, but he has had the link, so.
Oh, righto. Okay, so have you passed it over to me? Yes, yes. Okay. What about Colin Stewart? Sorry, could I ask you all to mute yourselves, please? Okay. Right. Good evening. Please could I remind members and those registered to speak to keep muted until invited to speak by having raised their virtual blue hand, and when finished speaking, please mute yourself. Right, I'll go straight into this because we had no deferrals from additional chairman's actions. Hence, you'll notice Neil is not watching. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies received from Councillor Dyer.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest on items on the agenda, including contact with or communication from applicants, objectors, supporters, or agents, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Now, with respect to item 8.5.c, the Riverside project, if this were a planning application, councillors are covered via the Code of Conduct, item 11. In that, they can all take part in the discussion, but cannot vote, providing they have declared their interest and lodged it on the Register of Interests SDC. However, we are not voting on an application in this instance, since it will purely be involve a discussion resulting in a response regarding to the consultation, and the town clerk thinks that this is permissible. However, members may prefer to declare an interest. Do I have anybody who wants to declare an interest in anything? Councillor Cleave?
Yep, my hand is up. Yes, I declare an item on that matter due to being a member of Stratford Town Trust.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Similar, trustee on the Town Trust. So I think it's probably best if I don't get involved in the debate. It's probably easiest. But I'm not quite sure what's allowed and what's not. So I'd welcome any guidance you can give, Chair. If that's well, I think I'm going to step back. Is probably my preferred option.
It is your choice, yes. But according to the Code of Conduct, you can contribute.
Right. Okay.
Any others? None? No. I'll declare on this particular issue that I've had contact from several residents, and as a committee member of Stratford Sports Club, which is on the rec and hence have an interest in any proposed changes which might have an impact on the club. Okay. Item 3, to receive written requests for dispensation for disclosable pecuniary interests. There are none. Item 4, to grant any such requests. That's okay. Item 5, public participation of non-agenda items on matters under which the council has control of or is a consultative body, subject to a time limit of 15 minutes, 3 minutes per speaker. I don't think we have any members who wish to speak in public participation on non-agenda items. Item 6, pre-planning applications. There are none. Item 7, to approve the draft open minutes of the Planning Consultative Committee meeting on the 15th of December?
Yeah.
Can I have your show of approval for the minutes, please? Can you wave your yes tick, Councillor Taylor? I'm still waiting for some people to put their tick up.
I'm sorry, Chair, I can't. Ah, got it. Yes.
There's only 3 in support of it so far. It's a yellow tick, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, not a yellow, a green tick.
So I was just going to say that in the new version of Zoom, which I think we've all got, although the option is there for the green tick, it only stays on the screen for 10 seconds. So I've got it. It's on now for me, and so I think we've all got the same issue. Is that we've all pressed green, but at slightly different times, so they've come on and gone off at the same time.
Would you like?
Oh, I see.
Would you like me?
Would
you like me to run the poll?
The poll. Going forward, we propose to use the poll option.
What's the poll option?
I will run the poll now, and that's how you.
All right. Are you going to educate us en route?
Right. Right. So if you all vote now. Once you've voted, it should disappear off your screen.
What am I looking for, Joe?
Have you?
It says 6 out of 6, 100%. Is that right? Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, everyone's voted now. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's unanimous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have to fire this off every time, Joe?
Yes.
Okay. That's a nice little job for you. Okay.
Okay. So
are you going to disappear it off the screen now?
Yeah, it should. You shouldn't be able to see it now. It should have gone.
Well, I can see it. Right, I've got rid of it.
Yeah. Okay.
I forgot where I am now. That was item 7. Item 8.1, list of planning applications deferred from chairman's actions. There are none. I'll just scroll down. Item 8.2, to note action by the town clerk after the actions in 8.2. Are you have you noted those actions in the town clerk's open report? We're going back to nodding now, I see. Okay, noted. Please note that the chairman's actions was attended by Councillor Taylor and myself, as was additional chairman's actions. Item 8.3, street trading, there are none. Licensing, there are none. Item 8.4, notice of decision. I hope you've had a look at the notices of decision. I didn't see too much difference from what we were saying as opposed to what the district council had got to say. There was one item which was refused by the district council, for which we went no reps, and it happened to be in my ward, so I did look it up as to the decision, and I think it's a bit of a narrow one as to the reason why you you refuse something or you let it go through. Okay, item 8.5. The first item is item 8.5a. As you're probably aware, John Deegan stepped down from being chair of the transport group, resulting Colin, who's here this evening, being successful in becoming the new chair. And so I thought it would be appropriate to invite Colin to inform us as to where the town transport fits into the general framework of organisations in the town, and his aims and ambitions for the group and the town during his tenure. Colin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for inviting me along this evening to talk to you. I thought what I'd do is just give a little bit of background to the Stratford-upon-Avon Town Transport Group, because clearly it predates me, and then a bit about our membership and capability, and then the aims, ambitions, and opportunities. I'm not going to give a visual presentation. I'm going to talk, because in this sort of thing, sometimes it's easier to just listen rather than do it via Zoom. So just then to start on the first one, just about me. I've been a resident in Stratford for over 35 years, but during that, most of that time, I've been a director of ARUPS, doing transport planning, highways, rail, metro, trams. But I spent my time working across the world. So whilst I've lived here, I haven't been involved necessarily on what's going here in the past. But I've been involved in many, many large projects and transport issues across the world. Probably the one I'm most proud of is High Speed 1 down in London, where I was technical director for that and for some Pancras area regeneration. As the chair said, I was appointed chair of the TTG in September last year. In reality, I only joined the TTG a year ago today, so it was fairly swiftly in, and John wanted to step down, and I offered, I think, in the end, to take the chair. So I've had a little time to think about where we're going, what we're going to do. But of course, it doesn't start from a blank sheet of paper. As I understand it, the roots of the STG go back many years, and there will be those around this table who know that better than I. But I think since 2010, clearly it's been a joint working group formed by Stratford Society, Stratford Bid, and the Town Council. There are defined objectives, of course, which are on the website, which are, to review and discuss all issues pertaining to relevant transport modes in the town, and that remit covers all surface transport. So whether it's parking, pedestrians, cyclists, buses, coaches, visitors' coaches, and road and rail users, anything in transport that has an impact on the town. And the stated aim in the document is to ensure that transport services are for the benefit of all users. There is actually quite a detailed terms of reference formally, and those have got 4 parts. And I wonder, looking at certainly the year that I've been involved, whether all of these 4 parts are actually enacted, and I don't think they are. The first one is to review and discuss all issues relating to transport in the town. Well, of course, it can discuss all of those things, but the question is an output. The second one is to point out inconsistencies in current policies and procedures which need to be resolved. Of course, it can do that, but it's a question of when in the process. The third one intrigues me because it's to act as a sounding board for policies and procedures being developed. Not that have been, but being developed by the local authorities and things in the neighbourhood development plan. So that's quite an interesting part of the terms of reference to my mind, because it kind of defines where the group should sit in the process, and I'll come back to that. And then the fourth term of reference in the formal list is to carry out research on key issues and prepare papers summarising findings and conclusions. I haven't seen much of that in the year that I've been involved, but it clearly could be a key thing. So in order to do that, I thought I'd just mention the membership, because it is quite interesting. Well, I think it's interesting. I hope you will too. So the membership of the Stratford-upon-Avon Town Transport Group, clearly there are councillors representing all 3 councils, so Warwickshire County Council, District Council, and the Town Council. And there are officers from each of those as well. They will attend. There's attendance from the Stratford Society, the business community in the terms of Stratford, Member of Parliament, who usually sends somebody to represent him, representatives covering the neighbourhood development plan, Accessible Stratford, the Cycling Forum we've invited in recently, and then of course there are a number, as myself, who are independent technical advisors. And of course it's worth just coming to those, we've actually formed, or there is formed, a technical subcommittee. And the subcommittee is of those independent technical advisors, professionals with experience in a whole host of things which are relevant to transport. So they cover, expertise in many things, from transport planning, highways, railways, project management, construction, asset management, economics, health and safety, strategy, mobility, disability advice, and accessibility, just to name perhaps a few of the things that are covered by the group. So I look at that and think that's potentially quite a powerful thing for Stratford to have. So if I move to the aims and ambitions and perhaps what I see as the opportunities out there, the question is, what does it give us? Well, firstly, let's say that my experience around the world has told me that transport plays such a big part in the prosperity and economic viability of any town or city, come to that. And the impact that transport can have on any town if it's done right and it works and uplifts people is quite amazing. And in terms of Stratford, if visitors and residents can't get to where they want to get or do what they want, then certainly in the shape of visitors, they won't come. If it's too difficult, they won't appear, and we rely on them, don't we? So the first aim and ambition that I have down here is, and these are my personal interpretation of those formal ones, if you like, is to be seen as a respected and influential group in all matters of transport. And I think that comes back to a question Ian posed right at the beginning when he sent me an email on this, and that is how many people know that we exist and actually are trying to do work on their behalf. So perhaps we need to be better publicised. If I then look at the broad membership, I mentioned, who is covered and the experience there, it seems to be a unique forum in transport in Stratford-upon-Avon. It would provide the opportunity to bring views together, bring together disparate groups, opportunity to discuss and reach conclusions, and speak with one voice on transport. And if we have one voice, then perhaps we can get things done. It's my understanding or my impression that perhaps sometimes Stratford misses out because the controversial words I know, but we miss out because perhaps we don't have one voice. And if we did, we might get investment in a bigger way and get things done and get some more infrastructure that we need. The third thing I put down as aims and ambitions is to help to achieve an integrated, sustainable transport solution for Stratford-upon-Avon. How do we do that? Well, that's delivering major transport changes in infrastructure that Stratford needs. It's relieving congestion to achieve an environmentally acceptable transport system within Stratford. And it may be looking at innovative solutions. I'm quite fond of the 20-minute neighbourhood. Some people may have heard me talk about this before, but the 20-minute neighbourhood is a concept which says essentially in 5, 10, 15 and 20 minutes, you need certain things within reach. And if they're not, then that changes the way that towns and cities operate, but it also changes the way people visit those places and hence produces congestion and significant traffic. So, as I said, I've been here for 35 years. I've seen Stratford change an awful lot. I think we had what I might call one do-it-yourself shop and no supermarkets when I first moved here. We now have supermarkets all over the place and we have things that are slightly different. So we need to adapt, and therefore the aim of the group is to try and make sure that we come up with innovative solutions to do that. And at the end of the day, that will allow the town to prosper. Of course, one of the specific aims is to assist in delivering the transport infrastructure that are in and projects that are in the neighbourhood development plan. There's an awful lot of transport infrastructure and town centre projects that are in that plan. And if we can assist in any way to get those going, then we would be, I think it would be well worthwhile and time input. The one area that I think I've seen little sign of being used at the moment is providing technical assistance when required. I mentioned that it's actually in the formal scope to perhaps carry out research on key issues. There are technical skills within the group. The subgroup is all independent people with technical skills of various sorts in transport. So it's there to be used by yourselves and any other people that would require a third view or third party view of any proposal or creating a proposal, whether it's research or perhaps looking at examples in other towns. And again, there are many towns, big and small, that have had some of the problems that Stratford has. We're a bit unique too, but so one size never fits all. But there's a great opportunity there, I think, to provide and use the group to come up with perhaps suggestions and ways forward. But here's the but, and it is a but, I think. To be a sounding board and to assist in decision making, policy, and to help with solutions, which is in the terms of reference, I think the group needs to be further up the chain. So councillors and others need to bring items to the TTG, preferably before public consultation, because that's probably when the best value of the group could be had. We can help bring things together to come to a common view, or we can be involved in that discussion. I think then the group could add real value. I think at the moment, in terms of where it sits in the process, to answer the question, it seems too far at the back end of that process. There's a lot of experience in the group about how to get things off the ground and bring them through with clear understanding of planning and the benefits, disbenefits, the economics, the environmental benefits and disbenefits, etc. A lot of experience of the process of doing that. And it just seems to me there's an opportunity that we might be able to help. So that was really all I was going to say. Just to end by saying that, at the end of the day, the group is there to assist both all three councils and others and residents too. So it comes down to a question, how best can we use that professional capability? How can we help? It's a resource there that can help in the way going forward if it's positioned in the right and most effective place. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take questions. And
yes, thank you, Colin. Right, who wants to start the questioning? Come on, let's see some right, now. Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Colin, for your presentation. I wasn't fully aware of the technical slant of the group, to be perfectly honest. So I think certainly it's something I'll bear in mind in the future in terms of work we're doing, particularly in the town centre. It also actually applies quite nicely to one of, I think, the next agenda, or the agenda item after next, in terms of talking about the proposals from the town trust, which certainly do have a large transport element in them. So yeah, thanks for certainly making me aware of the capability and the willingness to work in that. I don't think, have I got any specific questions? In terms of the meeting, I see from the terms of reference you meet every month, and I see we've got representation from Ian's our representative from the town council, and we also have various councillors on the rostrum as well. So I guess the best route is through those to engage with the group. That'd be correct.
Councillor Curtis is also a member of the group. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. I must say, I mean, I sit in as an observer to the town transport group, and I'm very impressed both by not only Colin's expertise, but the expertise and knowledge of the people on that sort of group. And so it's obviously a very valuable resource for things that we want to run past. I've got two questions in a way. One is, I don't think you have any funding at all, do you? So request for your help in doing research, is that an issue? Would you just all do that voluntarily? Is that the way it's going to work? Is the one question. And the other question is, at the end of the day, you are not a decision-making organisation. That it's going to be effectively Warwickshire County Council who are going to make decisions. So it's, are you comfortable that you have the ear of the decision makers so that your valuable input can be considered and represented in any final decision? And if you're not, is there anything that we can do to help?
Okay. Chair, shall I respond to those?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So on the funding issue, the only funding that I'm aware that we get is the hire of the town hall when we can meet. But of course we're Zooming like everybody else currently. So that's the case. I think there would be a point, obviously, if we had a major piece of research that perhaps would be difficult. But I think the offer is there. If somebody asks us to do something, we're not going to get the clock out and start timing for the 5 minutes. I think there's enough enthusiasm within the group to try and come to things to help, and that's why we're part of the group. Obviously, if you want 3 months of research, we may come back with a different answer, but that's where we stand on the funding. And just as an example, I had a discussion earlier today, actually, with Simon Haircover, who's won this research for the last mile delivery, something that I heard about via a different route, actually. But that was an interesting discussion, and I think it's something, again, we can help out with and make connections. On the second question, we're not a decision-making body, absolutely right. But I think this comes about having the respect, perhaps, of the various councils, of knowing not only the councillors but the officers in places like Warwickshire County Council, and I hope that and I think they respect the views that we have and the capability that exists. So I think we're comfortable with it, and I'm hoping they are too.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Cleeve.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to see you in person, Colin, even though it's virtually. Just bearing in mind with what was said about Warwickshire County Council, although you're not a decision making, I understand that they recognise you as a consultee, so they talk to you anyway. Can I just ask? I mean, it's the organisation's obviously invaluable for what information you get or give out. Just wondering, where my initial understanding beforehand was there was a lot of people who were more interested in cycling than other parts, but is it fairly evenly split, that you have people who represent sort of trains, buses, other forms of transportation, as well as just cycling? Not knocking cycling, obviously, but I just wanted to see that there's an even split on everything.
I'd like to think that there's an even split, and if there isn't, then we can always put it right. We've actually only just recently, in fact, the last couple of months, asked the Cycle Forum to join us formally. So we now have somebody representing from the Cycle Forum, because it is quite a big issue. Mm-hmm. But nearly everybody else, I think, is across the board, various different types of movement. I mean, I myself cycle, but I'm not one of the keenest cyclers in the world. And I have experience in rail and metro cycle. One of our guys is a highway specialist. So there's a lot of experience, and also planning and economics. So I think it's certainly not a cycling group.
No, that's great. I figured that would be it. Thank you, Colin.
Thanks.
Councillor Fradgley.
Thank you, Chair. I was just actually going to say that this group's been going a long time, and I've been part of it for quite a long time. And I must say that it has, through its seriousness of intent, managed to attract and keep, as a community group, high-level officers from county and district. And I think that is quite remarkable in a time when officers' time has to be paid for and is valuable, that this group is seen as being serious enough and important enough for officers to attend on a fairly regular basis. When Zoom finishes, might be a different game. So in fact, Zoom might be a way forward to keep that connection going.
Good point.
Have you a question, Councillor Fradgley?
No, I just wanted to support what Colin was saying, because I think it's very important that that group has, and I think Colin's taking it forward into quite an important place, which is quite a good resource for the town.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else who wants to ask a question. No. I think you're in for a hectic few years, Colin. If we've got 3,500 houses in along Marston, and there's other applications coming in for that area, we've got 210 houses coming at Waitrose, plus a business park. and I know you live just up the road from me, so I think south of the river is going to be absolutely swamped, more than it is, a lot more than it is at the moment, unless we have some clear thinking on how we manage the traffic on over Clopton Bridge, Seven Meadows Bridge, or whatever other roads tend to get built. And I think that's worrying an awful lot of people as to how we're going to manage that. Have you any views on all this that's going on and what will happen south of the river?
I think I have, and the group does. I think the important part is that we need to, people will have heard me say this, I think, as well, but there's potential creep in place then to give significant infrastructure improvements, come up with anything that's really significant. So I think I've certainly had discussion with Warwickshire officers about that as well, is to how we get to a place where actually, if you look at the summation of these things, we need a solution to both the town centre, traffic issues, and the approach across the river. And that has to be done looking at the entirety of the thing rather than just develop across for small pieces on the way. So I think there is certainly something to be done there, and would welcome the opportunity to engage at a detailed level, see whether we can come up with a way of delivering a way forward.
Thank you. One last question, if I may. Do you think traffic lights on Clopton Bridge is going to work?
That's I'm personally very skeptical. Yeah. And to me, it's one of those examples where modelling might show that it has a minor advantage. It also could be an example, though, where actually if you then include cycling, and notwithstanding what Councillor Cleave said, if you include cycling in that provision as well, it could have a net detrimental effect. So I think there's an issue there. I don't think the current plans for that junction have very much cycling included, and therefore they really, with the current government guidance, need to be reviewed. And it may mean that the solution isn't a great benefit overall.
Thank you. I wasn't setting you up for that one, Colin. Right, no more questions? Oh, Mr. Mayor, a late one.
I've thought of another question, which is related to the next item on the agenda, which is the reopening of the railway line from Stratford via Honeybourne. And I wasn't quite sure whether the Transport Group had been approached to give a view to the Town Council on its viability or whatever, or whether that's or whether you had any thoughts on it. It's one of those things that's coming down the line, so to speak, and it's probably something where your input would be valuable for the Town Council, I think.
Okay, I think the answer from my perspective is that we haven't actually been asked to consider that within the last 12 months while I've been around. I know there have been previous discussions about it, and of course it is in the NDP as a potential. I think that is something that we would have a look at, or could have a look at, should I say.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Claudine, for coming along to speak to us this evening. Your evening is finished now if you want to disappear, but you're very welcome to stay and listen to the rest that's going to be debated this evening. It's up to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we now come on to the next item, which is to do with the reopening of the lines and new passenger services. It was interesting. I hadn't realised Karen had worked for ARAP, because ARAP did the last quotation on putting this line in. It's the one a couple of years ago. I forget how long was it, 2012 or 14, something like that. And they wanted to put they want to come down Seven Meadows Road, and they want to build some kind of tunnel or whatever up Somerton Way to get to the station. And ARAP were responsible for basically the feasibility study. but it was, I think that at the end of the day, they couldn't get anybody to, any rail company to get involved, because the total cost was forecast to be 97 million. And there was going to be a permanent revenue subsidy, an annual one. So it was getting quite costly. But that's the past. What we now have in front of us is something that we've already seen. We have agreed in principle that we give our support, and now we're being asked to open our purse strings. I think I read somewhere they want £20,000, and they've had a couple of £5,000 offers. So we've got to make a decision as to whether or not we wish to make them an offer of some money from us. Councillor Fradgley.
I've lived with this for so many years. It is an incredibly difficult topic because I have two sets of residents, one set passionately in favour of it and want it to happen tomorrow. I have another set passionately against it. So if you're looking at the democratic will to have it happen, I think it's completely balanced. So the decision is ours to make. My concern at the moment is the financial situation that we're in. I think it's very, very difficult to take on new support at the moment. I think it would be rather interesting to actually perhaps talk more to Colin about it, perhaps actually to engage with Fraser Pithy, who is incredibly supportive of it, to actually get a more across the piece opinions from all sides before we actually open our purse strings to support it. I know that sounds rather negative, but I just worry about our costs at the moment and what we're being asked. We've got ongoing commitments to the Fred Winter. We've got ongoing commitments in Bloom and Lights. And I just think at this particular point in time, it's quite difficult.
Can I just add something before I invite Councillor Cleave? I think one thing we must remember that at a previous PCC meeting we had, we were invited to apply for some money, so to speak, to have a budget. And the decision that we made is that we didn't apply to have a budget because we deal with planning applications, we don't spend money. So we can't sit here tonight and say we're going to give them 10 grand or whatever. But what I can tell you is, well, as we know, the budget is being debated at the town council meeting. And this particular issue will be part of that. It will be on the agenda of the town council meeting. So the town clerk tells me. So they don't want us to agree that we're going to give them 5 grand. What they want us to do is to give them a view as a recommendation. So, Councillor Cleave.
I think you've just answered my question. I was going to ask, as the planning committee, is that something we were able to do, was offer money? No. But can I just say I do agree with what Councillor Jenny Fradgley has just said about this is probably for us as a council, let alone the planning committee, it's the wrong time to be investing in something like that, especially with it not if all the residents were in agreement, that would be one thing, but with it being quite a divisive thing. I mean, I'm right in the middle of it as well. I mean, while I'd like to see it from an environmental point of view to have additional transportation, also what is the environmental impact in the first place of putting it there? So yeah, I agree with Councillor Fradgley about right now whether we can afford it or not. It's not I think we have other commitments that we've already agreed to before we fund that.
Councillor Lee?
Yeah, again, from what Councillor Frashy was saying and Councillor Cleave, I mean, I was at the Finance and Scrutiny, or whatever we're known as now, meeting last week, and this is certainly a big topic in terms of budget. At that meeting, we did effectively look to reduce what our proposed version 7 budget was already without considering this. So for me, this is not something I could support right now.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I suppose, do we want to have an integrated transport strategy is one question. Do we want to look at alternatives to new roads, increasing congestion and pollution in the town, or should we be investigating alternatives and biting the bullet on actually funding the investigation into those alternatives? I think the fact that public opinion, yes, we should take account of public opinion, but I think as councillors, we also have the responsibility to do what we think is the right thing. So my view, this is, we're being asked for funding for a study to see if this is a viable or to see how viable this would be. I mean, and I speak as someone who uses the Greenway frequently. I run down it, I cycle down it, I'd be very close to any action. But I'd put my cards absolutely on the table. I would be absolutely in favour of reinstating some type of transport down the Greenway, probably light electric tram coming right through the town. I think that is the future. And if we shy away from investigating and funding the investigating, we're just kicking the ball down the road further. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Fradley, you're muted.
Yeah, can I just come back on that? I mean, it's quite true. I think most of us here would actually want to discuss further what the options might be for heavy rail, single track, double track, light rail, whatever it might be. I mean, there have been ideas in the past of a vehicle that will be on track, on road. In the 1930s, I believe there was one. I think we have actually contributed to two feasibility studies in the past. One when Councillor Clive Thomas was here, and I think we did contribute to the last one, I'm not too sure. But there have been two feasibility studies, both of which, and now we're looking at a third one. I just think this planning group perhaps needs to take on more background information so we know exactly what the feasibility study actually purports to do, what the timescales on it are before we actually put money up. Next year, we might be in a different position financially, and we might be more educated as to what might be happening here, and we might actually see our way to putting some money into feasibility study. I just think it's sad that this feasibility study has come mid-COVID when there's going to be very little money from councils on the table, but I do believe the government have put in a fair amount of money, and that's put more wind in the sails of this through their sort of reverse beaching programme. So I think there is money around publicly. I'm just not sure that this year we're in a position to actually add to that, is my view.
Councillor Curtis.
Thank you. Yes, I'm very much in agreement with Councillor Frashley, other Councillor Frashley, Jenny. And I think what I'd like to see is, rather than this being kicked into the long grass, can we get that further information exactly, Councillor Frashley, as you suggest, so that we're fully informed about the timescale, what further information we need to be able to make that decision. I'd be very much in favour of that. Very much in agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, another voice of agreement, actually. I think it would be really useful to see the proposed terms of reference of the feasibility study, and if we can see that in advance and share that with the town transport group to get their input to make sure that it actually covers all of the different issues. I must be honest, I thought the feasibility study was going to look at a sort of a heavy like railway track, and wouldn't look at an option of light, a light tram or something down the Greenway. And Councillor Curtis is right. I think we need to look at all the options. So all of the options, in a way, need to be included in that feasibility study. So that's probably my preferred option, is that we actually ask to see the terms of reference to the feasibility, share that with the town transport group, and then if we think that feasibility study is going to meet our objectives and needs, then we would support it at that time.
Do I have a proposal? Well, we've got to make a recommendation to the town council next week. It is next week, isn't it? Or the week after. Councillor Fradgley.
May I propose that we recommend that the planning committee seeks more information from relevant bodies, so that we can then inform the town council as to all the issues that are involved, and make a decision about any financial support would have to wait until the next financial year, if not beyond that. We've got to see where our funds sit before we can take on any more expenditure, I feel. Although I do think there are possibilities here which might work for us, but I'm not sure what they are.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Cleave? Thank you. Can I take a vote on that? And I'm not quite sure how you want to do it. Are we having a poll?
Having a poll. Yes, I'm about to. I've set the poll up, so you should now be able to vote. Once you've voted, it should disappear off your screen.
Right, I've got 6 out of 6, 100%. Is that...
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So that's unanimous.
That's unanimous, yes.
Yeah.
Right. Now let me find my place now. Right. Item 8.5.c, the Stratford Riverside project. As you're all aware, this is a joint venture between the District Council and the Town Trust. I did ask Councillor Lee if he would prepare some notes for us to kick off this particular item. So I'd like to pass over to Councillor Lee to take us through his thoughts so far. Councillor Lee.
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was sat one evening in January working out how to respond to this, because to be perfectly honest, it's a huge amount of information to absorb. In terms of my initial thoughts, first in terms of what the Town Trust are doing in on actually consulting on this, again, I think we should be positive towards that. We as obviously as a planning committee are very keen on having early sight. It's something we mention lots of times to developers in terms of if we can get involved early on in the process. So in terms of what the Town Trust are putting forward, I think that principle is great. So we should be complimentary to the Town Trust for that. In terms of how they've done this consultation, they've obviously not gone out with a blank sheet of paper, which I think is a good thing. But what they have done is put forward a very comprehensive proposal with literally getting into sort of towards 3 figures of ideas incorporated into it. which is actually quite, it covers so many different themes and obviously covers quite a large area. And I think I have described it as an explosion of ideas. So it's quite difficult to really look at it as a whole scheme, knowing that they've got £1.5 million of funding for it, and what's presented is going to be at least double figures of millions to even scratch the surface of in terms of delivering it all. So I think in terms of our response to it, what I propose is that we prioritise the key aspects of what's being put forward by the trust. It's clearly quite a blue skies piece of work, and there's some projects in there which are relatively low cost, some projects which have a lot of crossover with the NDP and wider issues, particularly around transport in the town. So what I propose is really we focus in on what we think is the important bits of what's in the proposed document. Try and put together a ranking of that, whether it's a top 5 or a top 10, what we'd like to see, and really also set out if there's anything we don't like in there. I say there's so many ideas presented. To be fair, it is actually relatively coherent. It's just a lot of it. So what I'll do is, if I take you through my certainly top 3 in terms of where I'm coming from, I didn't want to go any further than that because I wanted to get your views, really, to be perfectly honest, as to where people's thoughts are. I've also not gone as far as putting in anything I don't like. I think it's something, again, do I have something I don't like in there? I'm not so sure. It's just that as a scheme, it is vast, and that's possibly the thing I don't quite like about it right now, because I can't see exactly how it will develop over time. But that's possibly the one thing I don't like right now. So my top 3 really, and this has got real links with the NDP really, and things that have been talked about for a long time. So I think had the town trust proposed something either in the south of the river or north of the river, I probably wouldn't have this opinion. But by looking at it holistically, we have to recognise that we've got the key issue is getting across the river. So I certainly, when reading through this document, the things that struck to me are the bridge crossings, and if the town trust and the other supporters are proposing greater interaction between the two sides, encouraging cycling, encouraging pedestrians, this is really the thing that needs to be solved for me. We've clearly got within the NDP a project for Lucy's Mill and a project for the tramway crossing as well. So in terms of what I propose as a response is those two would be my top priority for this project to address. I mean, with £1.5 million, could they address both? Probably not, but I think you'd have to have very clear plans for what happens to Lucy's Mill and the tramway crossing for the integration of the north and the south side, particularly if you're going to encourage more cycling, which is currently prohibited across both of those crossings, and also looking at the parking side as well, which is what I've got as number 3. So in terms of what's proposed, it is almost, I say, a very big transport change for Stratford in terms of effectively developing almost 2 new car parks north of the river and south of the river and trying to integrate the two. So how that works with the rest of the town is quite a key aspect for me. So those are my top 3. In terms of other things on there, great, doing trails, I think that could be relatively low cost. I think there's some possibly easy wins on there, but exactly how it's delivered is the thing I don't fully understand from what's set out in the document. Appreciating, I know that the town trust did put this together in relatively short time, and again, in terms of, say, the approach. I like the approach in terms of consulting early, and I like the fact that they've not come to us with a blank sheet of paper and have perhaps arguably got too many ideas on the table. Those are my views. So I'd be interested in terms of feedback, in terms of, are you happy with supporting praise on the Town Trust for their early consultation, which hopefully would be an easy discussion? Would you be happy with prioritising a list of top 5 or top 10 of things we like about it, rather than trying to provide comments on everything in the document? And are you happy with setting out any things we don't like? And Ian's also obviously put forward in Appendix B the environmental assessment of the north side of the river in particular, which is an interesting read in terms of the history and what's currently there. And are we happy with any of the proposals that could alter that environment, shall we say? So any thoughts?
Thank you, Toby. Just one point: the LEP money has to be spent by sometime in 2022. I can't remember exactly when, but that's the deal. They get the 1.5 million, but they've got to spend it by a date. Councillor Fradgley. Unmute yourself, Councillor Fradgley.
Sorry. I think that was a really clear bit of thinking that focuses where to actually put our thoughts. I thought that was very, very useful. My major concern in this is how the parking works. I do have some major concerns about increasing parking at the fisherman's car park end, because if you get too much parking at that end, it's going to increase numbers that then are going to be walking through what is at the moment people value as kind of biodiversity meadow. However, I think the biodiversity there could be hugely improved with expert advice from various bodies who could actually give us advice on how to improve that. But I don't think that would be improved by having picnic tables and too many pathways through it, because it would just then become another wreck, which would actually destroy that sense of remoteness on the side of the town and the ability for wildlife to exist there and for the biodiversity that we need to improve insect and et cetera, et cetera. I would actually have much more interest in a road coming off the Warwick Road, which has been suggested in the past, which would take traffic into the back of the leisure centre for more parking, rather than actually having it put out at the Fisherman's Car Park. However, when I went down to the Fisherman's Car Park during the summer, it was mayhem there. Because of lockdown, everybody went back to where they'd learnt how to swim and where they wanted to swim and boat the children. It was absolutely rammed. And that incredibly dangerous piece of road, there was parking on both sides. And the county had to come out and have people actually on duty there with no parking all the way along, because it became extremely dangerous. So I think the Fisherman's Car Park is a car park we've got to think about really, really carefully. But I just think to willy-nilly expand it with tarmac and goodness knows what else is absolutely the wrong thing to do to actually benefit the biodiversity and the wildlife of that area, which I know people value.
Thank you. Councillor Curtis.
Thank you, Chair. Quite a few comments I got really, and again, thanks Toby for that clarification. First of all, looking at the car parking, I completely agree with Councillor Fradgley. I mean, the current car parking capacity, I think, is about 56 or so cars. To extend that tenfold to 500 seems insane, and I'd like to really know where the evidence. There's in this myriad of documents, there seem to be an awful lot of assumptions, and I'd like to question where the evidence lies for some of these assumptions. I think looking at the car parking, where is the evidence that this would be used as a sort of park and ride? I would really like to see a strong evidence base for that. And certainly in terms of other park and rides, I'm afraid I'm not encouraged by the way they have been used in the past. Looking at the number of cars that are parked on the road in that video, there are about 50 either side. So even if you increase the capacity to 150, it would still be far less than the 500. So that's one point. Another thing I'd like to see, there's a lot of talk about this proposal supporting town centre economic regeneration. Again, a lot of assumptions, but there's no evidence presented. Again, I'm not saying it wouldn't, but I think if we're being asked to form views on this, we should ask for where the evidence is on that. Small point, the onion field, as I understand, the owner of the onion field hasn't actually yet been approached about selling that drop of land. Going back, sorry, I'm dodging around a little bit. I've got about half a dozen points here. The current car parking capacity at Bridgefoot and Leisure Centre, is that actually used to capacity? I'd like to just sort of check on that, really. A relatively small point, art and sculpture and coffee stands. I think coffee stands would be a terrible idea, to be honest, because it will just increase litter. And art and sculpture, yes, I'm very much in favour of public art of high quality. But we look at some of the stuff, I mean, I think maybe this is just a highly subjective personal view, but that statue at the outside the birthplace of Shakespeare, I think is a lump and dreadful piece of work. It's just awful. Small point. But my final comment really is looking at pages 9 and 10 of the report about the habitat. Very briefly, it says potential value, management of some of the habitats will significantly improve the ecological value to the site. Most important of these would be wetting up and restoring the northern flood meadow to a nationally threatened. This would not only help species diversity, but help with local flood control. It could be of county importance. And then finally on page 10, again, it talks there a lot about the habitats, and that doesn't really seem to have been taken into account. And I would be very concerned that what we may end up with around the Fisherman's Car Park is rather a sanitized area. And, you know, we only have to look at what's happened to the Bancroft to see what the worst excesses of that type of development could be. So thank you, Chair, for your time. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Cleave, do you wish to remain silent? Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. From my point of view, I think the northern side of this development is the greater concern to me than the southern. However, I think some of the points that Toby's raised about the bridges and the crossings are very, very valid, because if we bring in more people, we need to create a greater capacity to move them around. From the northern side, I tend to agree with what some of the other councillors have said previously about the increase in the number of car parking spaces. Certainly, if we actually look around town, and obviously at the present moment, we all know that we're way under capacity. There doesn't seem to be a general shortage, even at peak times, of actually car parking facilities and spaces around town. And we already have a vastly underutilised park and ride on the opposite side of the town. From how this development's been promoted, surely it's going to bring people more into the Warwick Road side than it will Birmingham Road side. And then you could end up with almost moving a similar problem to a different area. So I don't see that the parking there is really necessary in the level that they're talking about.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I might add that, following on from what Councillor Fradgley said, in one of the previous plans, one of the objectives was to see how they could stop people having to come around the gyratory system in order to park. And that's where the thought arose that they would have a separate road off the Warwick Road just before Warwick Crescent starts, which would take them into the back of the leisure centre car park. I don't really have any figures as to how much the leisure centre car park is used, and as to whether or not the 500 things that they're talking about up on the Fisherman's car park, could they grab a bit more land by the leisure centre to expand the car park if it's necessary? My personal view is I think they should build this road and they should improve the car park at the Fisherman's car park, but it's got to be done properly, and it's got to be done such that you know, you don't know it's a car park basically, apart from seeing the cars, so that you maintain everything that you need to maintain in this strip, which you will find in the document that Toby mentioned, the Warwickshire Trust Report. And I would recommend that everybody does have a read of that, and we take notice of it. Okay. Anybody else want to say anything? Councillor Fradgley.
Could I just follow up? If that car park, the Fisherman's car park, if anything were to be done there, I think it should be done in a completely green fashion, that it has the plastic support with grass growing through, that there are trees there, that it actually develops, and it doesn't increase the numbers very much more than they are now. If people want to take their families down there to swim, if there's a cycle track across and a walking track, that's sufficient. You can park down at the leisure centre and take a meander down to the swimming place and actually enjoy yourself. You don't have to actually commercialise the Fisherman's car park.
Councillor Cleeve.
Thank you. I did just want to say, yeah, I do agree with all the concerns that have been raised. And I think the most important thing at this point is to look at the biodiversity we have at the end of the day. Climate change emergency, and our green issues should take priority over everything else. That's it.
Thank you. We're writing that down quickly.
I just very much agree with what Councillor Cleeve has just said.
Councillor Lee.
Hi there. Yeah. So I've been obviously listening to different views on what's put forward. So I'd like to try and surmise what I think we should be putting in this consultation response. So I've not had any objection to the approach of setting out our priorities, so I shall continue with that. I've had no objections to the comments on the two pedestrian crossings, so I shall continue to finesse those and make those a priority from our perspective as a town council. Appreciating what Ian's informed us about in terms of the LEP funding, I think realistically that would have to be limited to feasibility work, possibly land purchase maybe, but that's probably as far as you could go in terms of doing anything with the bridges. But I think that still should be one of the top priorities. In terms of the parking, I've got a clear steer in terms of, I think as a council we seem to not like the idea of 500 spaces at the Fisherman's car park, and I think what we'd propose or certainly could respond with is, yeah, I think we'd like to see an enhancement of the car park, but certainly not expanded to that extent, but supports the idea which is included in the document, which is to have the road constructed coming off the Warwick Road into the back of the car park, and if expanded car parking on the Warwick Road side is seen as feasible or desirable, then it should be focused on the leisure centre. So that's my thoughts there. In terms of this being taken forward in terms of the north side of the river, I think it's worth, obviously we've had a nice presentation from the transport group, is to get their input into it and see and certainly get the town trust to engage with them on a technical level. I think that would be, and I think promote them as a key party and a key stakeholder for the town trust going forwards with developing certainly the transport aspects to the project. Any other things I've picked up from discussion? I think I've got an overriding, ambition from the council that we don't want to see basically overdevelopment of the north side, and that we'd like it to be more of an ecological development, rather, which does provide access, but it's more the ecology rather than any putting any new infrastructure there, like the visitor centre or the coffee shops proposed. And we want to see it as a quiet area rather than a development area which is perhaps more suitable for the south of the river, where we've already kind of got that infrastructure in place. Anything else I've picked up on? Perhaps maybe promote, perhaps I don't know, the one I think David mentioned about the public art, and again thinking about obviously the time that the trust have got to spend this money, that is feasible, and obviously that could be promoted. I suspect that art and culture is obviously taking quite a battering from recent events, and that could be quite a positive thing to help developing a trail or something within the existing structure. That could be an idea to put that forward. I can't see anything else, but that's where I'm thinking in terms of taking it as a response. Does that sound reasonable?
There's one thing I may add, if I may, Toby, is we must remember that there are three aspects to this development. There's the north, the south, and central.
The middle,
and the central does worry me about how that's going to be managed, particularly for cyclists. How do cyclists manipulate themselves to get from A to B or from north to south or whatever? Mr. Mayor, you want to say something?
Well, only a general comment in a way, and that's to emphasise the value of the public consultancy here. This is a genuine exercise to engage with the public, to listen. There are lots of ideas within the proposal. They were all done at a bit of a rush to make sure that we got an application in for the funding. There's nothing been agreed. Everything is open for consultation, and so the value of people actually going onto the stratfordriverside.com and completing their views so that they can be heard is really valuable. There's been nothing in the discussion that I've heard tonight that I've not come across in the past 6 weeks. Very fair and balanced comments, and would be really valuable input into the overall consultancy. What I would say is, if there is anybody watching this now online, can I encourage everybody to actually go and look at the Riverside project and to make their views heard as well. That's really great. Just on the points that Councillor Lee made about traffic, the Town Transport Group have also submitted a draft response to the consultancy, and I think it might be worth if we can share their thoughts, because they've actually got views on crossing the roads at different sides. So trying to get a sort of, so that we don't contradict each other in a way. I think there's lots of things in there that we would support as well. Yeah.
I've got a copy of what the Town Transport Group had to say. I think Elizabeth sent it out yesterday, I think it was. I'll have a read of it and I will email it out to you. Okay. Nothing else to say? One question, Mr. Mayor. How many responses have you had so far?
They've had over 200 through the website. So there's lots of, and a lot of the things that we have discussed tonight, that's been discussed tonight, have obviously, they're very common themes that have cropped up. So, but I think the town council actually supporting or not supporting certain things will carry some weight, definitely.
Yes. Right. Thank you. Right. Nobody else wants to say anything? This is not the end of the day, because we shall I say cobble something together, and before we submit anything, you'll all have an opportunity of seeing what's been said. Okay, and Joe will enter it hopefully by the end of the month. Okay. The next item is 8.5.D, and it's the SBD for the draft Gypsy and Traveller and travelling show people, and the district council are running a consultation on it. I personally haven't looked at it yet. It's got to be in by 5 p.m. on the 19th. Are you happy if we as a group have a look at this and we put it onto the next agenda? I mean, I think what you've been noticing recently is we've become something much more than just looking at planning applications. And that's what I'm personally keen to add on to our skills, is the ability to deal with all these different things ahead of when final decisions are being made. So you're happy that we bring to you something to do with the Gypsy and Traveller site for the next meeting? Okay. Right. That was all item 8. Item 9, Chairman's verbal report. Nothing. Item 10, requests for alteration of recommendation. I would say there are none, but I've had one come in about 10 minutes before this meeting started, so from Lisa, so I haven't looked at it yet, but they are asking us to review our what we said. Okay. Item 11, the SDC planning registration. There's planning on the 3rd of February and the 17th of February. We don't know what's on yet, so we'll have to wait and see if we have any applications coming forward. Item 12, to appoint substitutes to the next chairman's actions. I'd like to say I've got more than a substitute these days, because we can talk about football if
permanent replacement.
So are you happy?
Yes,
to continue?
yeah.
Because but Bill, I understand, is still having difficulty.
Fine with me.
Okay, so the next meeting will be on the 9th of February at 6 o'clock, and I'm going to close this meeting at 19:19. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
You can all go home now.
Thank you, Chair.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Could you stop the streaming, Ian, please?
Oh.
We're still streaming at the moment.
Oh.